to start today's video with a question for the comment section. And that question is, of any sports team name in any sport, let me know which is your favorite. Maybe it's just a really good name for a sports team. Maybe it has some cool history. Maybe it's funny. Whatever the reason is, I want you to let me know what is the best sports team name that you can think of. Because today's video, we're talking about the origins of 3 sports teams' names. And I'll be tapping on this this soccer ball, sort of stress ball, in honor of our first team that we're talking about. And that team is Totttenham Hotspur. And I'm starting with them because they sort of inspired their video. I've always wondered why they're called the Hotspur. So I did some research and then I started looking into some more, and here we are. So let's start with Tottenham. I know a lot of friends here on the channel are in the United States. So if you're not a soccer fan or football fan, this kind of football, the Tottenham Hotspur are a really, really good team. They're sort of in the top flight of English football. Now, to find the origin of their name, we have to go all the way back to the 1300s. In 1364, a man by the name of Henry Percy, also known as Harry, he was born in Yorkshire, near Harrogate, and he was sort of part of a noble family. I think that's the right use of the word. And when he was 12, he was around when his father's men retook a castle that had been taken over by some Scottish raiders. They had managed to kill the constable and they were ransoming his family. And there's this story of Harry Percy. I always gotta get a name wrong, at least one in every video. Henry Percy, there's the story of him sort of breaching, leaping into the breach rather, sword in hand. That's probably just a story, but over his teenage years, he made quite a reputation for himself, and he was known as sort of an impulsive and bold guy. He fought the Scots quite a few times, and in fact he was once captured by the Scots, and his ransom was set at 7,000 marks, which I think is about £4.5 million today. Please someone correct me in the comments, someone who knows British history better than I do. Don't trust my calculations. But he was so sort of well liked and respected that the royals and the government paid up. He also led raids against the French, but he got his nickname Harry Hotspur not from his allies, but from his fiercest enemies, the Scots. In Middle English, I think it's late Middle English, Hotspur literally meant a person whose spur is hot from rash or constant riding. There was a writer at the time, Thomas Walsingham. He wrote that, unlike his father, who was the guardian of the town of Berwick, Henry Percy was constantly active, more especially against the Scots, whom he subdued with tireless courage at every outbreak of disorder. On account of this, they called him Hotspur. So Harry eventually died at Shrewsbury, actually while leading an uprising against his half-cousin, who was King Henry IV. And when rumors started going around after his death that Harry Hotspur was actually still alive, the king had his body exhumed and displayed in public, and that sort of goes to show how feared and almost mythical Harry Hotspur was. But despite all that infighting throughout the years, the Percy family had, they'd been well rewarded with land and titles, honors. And actually, one of the areas that had been gifted to the Percy family was an area north of London known as Northumberland Park. So, skip ahead to the 19th century. In the middle of the 1800s, locals there in Northumberland Park started a cricket club, and they called it the Hotspur Cricket Club, which obviously referenced probably the most infamous of the Percy men. And in August of 1882, some of the younger guys, some of the lads from the cricket club, they met on Tottenham High Road to discuss maybe starting a football club, sort of something to keep them busy during the winter. So they went to the cricket club, and the cricket club gave them some financing to, buy some wood for the goal posts, the flag posts, and of course an actual soccer ball. Now, it wasn't always easy in the beginning for the club. There was a lot of fighting between sort of rival groups of gangs, basically fighting over turf, trying to get the grounds and the pitch to play on. And it was a man called John Ripshire. He was sort of like a respected member of the Christian community in Northumberland Park. He was the one to organize them. So he appointed a committee, he drafted a fixture schedule, and almost a year after that initial meeting on Tottenham High Road to discuss actually forming a club, he held a meeting to finally decide on a name for the club. And there were 21 men in that meeting, and John Ripshire was chairing. He chaired the meeting. A few suggestions were thrown around at the meeting, and in fact, the team was actually going to be called the Northumberland Rovers. However, a group of the guys who were at the meeting, they happened to be reading on the history of England in 1401 to 1403, and they were just like loving Harry Hotspur, Henry Percy. He was written about as performing these prodigies of valor on the battlefield. So they just admired him. And, he was Hotspur. Harry Hotspur was the son of the Earl of Northumberland. And they saw themselves as the sons of Northumberland Park. And in any case, those original guys who were part of the idea to bring together a soccer team, a football club, they wouldn't have it any other way. There had been the exact same discussions happened earlier when the cricket club was being formed to name, the Hotspur Cricket Club. And so that's how the Tottenham Hotspur got their name for their football club. And now we'll move on to a sport that's maybe a little bit more popular on this side of the Atlantic. Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills. So, William Frederick Cody was born in 1846. His father died when he was 11, so the family sort of suffered financially, and Bill had to go and work. So at first he worked for a freight carrier as a boy extra, which, talk about favorite team names. That might be my favorite job name. Please, someone hire me as a boy extra. Basically, what it meant is that he would ride up and down the length of a wagon train. This was during the Wild West times. And he would deliver messages between sort of the drivers and the workers of the wagon train. Then, during the Utah War, he worked as a scout for essentially the United States Army, to guide the army to Utah. There was sort of an uprising happening in Salt Lake City by the Mormons. He also claimed that when he was 14, he worked for Pony Express, but that's never actually been verified, and I think that's sort of a theme with who we'll call Bill, William Cody. He had some pretty extravagant stories to his name. So eventually he goes back home when his mother gets sick. And eventually when his mother recovers, well, it's the American Civil War. And Bill wanted to enlist as a soldier in the Union Army, but he was refused because he was too young. So he began working with a freight caravan in what today is Wyoming. And in 1863, when he's 17, he enlists as a teamster. So after the American Civil War, when that's over, he has a contract to supply the Kansas Pacific Railroad workers with buffalo meat, American bison. And Bill, he's sort of storied to have killed over 4,000 bison in an 18-month period between 1867 and 1868. And there's this story that he and another hunter, who was also called Bill Comstock, they had an 8-hour buffalo shooting competition over the exclusive rights to use the name Buffalo Bill. Bill Cody, the main character of our story, he ends up killing 68 animals, and Bill Comstock killed 48. So, William Frederick Cody becomes Buffalo Bill. In 1869, Buffalo Bill is 23, and he meets this writer, Ned Buntline. And Buntline later published a story based on Buffalo Bill's adventures, although most of them came from Buntline's own imagination. And those appeared in the New York Weekly. And then he published a really successful novel, Buffalo Bill, King of the Bordermen. And that was first sort of serialized on the front page of the Chicago Tribune. So, Buffalo Bill, this sort of myth of Buffalo Bill is already growing when he's 23. And, later Bill became world famous for Buffalo Bill's Wild West, which was a touring show that traveled in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and in continental Europe. So he, lived out the rest of his life already having this big myth, this origin story. That's partially true, partially created by the writer Ned Buntline. So let's fast forward to 1947. There's a barbershop quartet. They're touring around Buffalo. They're, singing for community groups. And they make an appearance at the Buffalo Quarterback Club. And for that performance, they are introduced as the Buffalo Bills. And that name sort of just stuck from that day on. That same year, the Buffalo Bisons, they are an All-American Football Conference team. That's, the name of the league. They held a fan contest to rename the team. There were a few popular choices: the Bullets, the Blue Devils, the Nickels. But the Buffalo Bills won. Now, it helped that the team owner was also the president of Frontier Oil, which, and this had, what I'm about to say had no bearing on that connection or that name being chosen. But I think there's a cool parallel here, because Buffalo Bill's family, I should say Frontier Oil, started out based in Canada and then moved to Wyoming and Kansas. And Buffalo Bill's family had also spent some time in Canada and Ontario, so, Canadians always have to shout out any small connection we have. And then he ended up in Wyoming and Kansas, so cool parallel that has nothing to do with the story. Now, the Buffalo Bills of the AAFC did not last very long. From 1950 to 1959, Buffalo did not have a football team. And in 1959, Ralph Wilson acquired a franchise in the AFL. And when Ralph Wilson asked local football fans for, potential names for the team, this came up, and he ultimately chose the Bills in homage to the AAFC team. And that is how we go from a story that started in 1846 to get the team that we now know as the Buffalo Bills. Now, the last team I want to talk about for today is the Charlotte Hornets. And for this team name, we go all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And again, I'm telling this story as a Canadian, so if I get any details wrong, please drop them in the comments. So, there is this British commander, Lord Cornwallis, and in July of 1779, he is charged with leading the British Southern Strategy, I think it was called, which was basically a plan to invade the South with sort of the idea that there was significantly more loyalists in the South who would rise up and assist in putting the rebellion down. Now, we're going to skip over a little bit of history to get to North Carolina. And in September 1780, Cornwallis leaves Camden, South Carolina, which they had, won essentially in war. And he makes his way northward toward Charlotte. I believe it was known as Charlottetown at the time. Meanwhile, there is a militia under General Davidson, and they're setting up camp on McAlpine's Creek, about 7 or 8 miles south of Charlotte. That group was made up of about 400 men, with, whatever weapons they could find, and very, very few supplies. However, Davidson reported that his men were in high spirits and determined to stand out to the last extremity rather than submit to the fate of South Carolina. So, on September 26th, 1780, the British entered the village. They entered Charlotte. So, of course, there's fighting, and Cornwallis urges the locals, the inhabitants of North Carolina, and specifically Charlotte, to turn over their weapons, stay at home, and that in return they would be protected by the British. But the people of North Carolina, they were not having it. So that the militia and the people kept, not just the militia, but the locals they kept harassing the British. So they would, send out small detachments to attack the British soldiers who were out foraging. They would also the British would often send out parties to plantations, and the plantations were already sort of slim pickings, but the Carolinians, we'll say Davidson's people, they would go out and stop the British foragers. They would intercept messages from Cornwallis and other officers to try to stop their communication, and they would capture loyalists and send them away. So they were doing everything they could with, again, just very few supplies and very few people to stop the British. And again, you guys who know more about the history of the Revolutionary War, you can let me know in the comments, but by reading up on it, I got the sense that the people of Charlotte and North Carolina, they were just sort of, they didn't want the war, so they didn't necessarily have a side or the other. They just wanted to protect their house, protect their home, protect their, their turf, for lack of a better word. So all this led to a famous battle, the Battle of King's Mountain, which was just devastating for the British southern strategy. In fact, some historians have said that it was sort of the turning point for the war. And famously, at the time, Cornwallis wrote about Charlotte, calling it a veritable hornet's nest of rebellion. Now, less than a week after the Battle of King's Mountain, Cornwallis began withdrawing from Charlotte. And that would be Charlotte's first and last enemy invasion. So we'll skip ahead a couple hundred years to 1985. The NBA has 23 teams, and they're looking to expand and add 4 teams by the 1988 season. And there's this entrepreneur from North Carolina, George Shin, and he wants to bring an NBA team to Charlotte. Now, at the time, Charlotte was primarily sort of like a banking city, and so a lot of critics of Shin's idea were doubtful that Charlotte could support an NBA team. It's a nice sort of full circle to the City Edition jersey video from 2 weeks ago with the mint City, Buzz City jerseys for Charlotte. But, Charlotte was a huge basketball city, at least for college basketball. So, in 1988, David Stern, the commissioner of the NBA, he awards the 24th NBA franchise to Charlotte. Now, originally, the team in Charlotte was supposed to be called the Charlotte Spirits. But they ended up having a name the team fan contests, as we've heard about the Bills, and as we see so commonly today when we expand teams. And the winning choice for the contest was the Charlotte Hornets. It's worth mentioning that there were Charlotte Hornets teams in the city before the basketball team. They had I think a minor baseball team and a World Football League team that lasted 1 or 2 seasons. But this is obviously the one that stuck. And then, of course, in modern sort of history, we all know after the 2002 season, the original Hornets moved to New Orleans. In 2004, Charlotte was granted a new franchise, and they were called the Bobcats. And then after the 2013-2014 season, the Bobcats changed their name to the Charlotte Hornets, and that allowed them to sort of claim the history and the records of the Hornets from 1988 to 2002. So today, with a bit of revisionist history, the Hornets are usually said to have suspended operations from 2002 to 2004, and the New Orleans Pelicans are considered an expansion team from 2002. This just streamlines things really nicely. But that is the stories of how 3 sports teams got their names. So don't forget to let me know in the comments what your favorite sports team name is. Even if it's like a fictional team. Like, I keep thinking while I'm making this video of the Sudbury Blueberry Bulldogs, which is a great ASMR name, by the way. I was thinking earlier of the Hotspurs Cricket Club. Just Cricket Club. Come on, Cricket Club. That's a great ASMR couple of words. But also the Sudbury Blueberry Bulldogs. If you know, you know. But that's it. Thank you for watching this video and for listening to me ramble on for a half hour. And I'll see you very, very soon for the next one.